watched yesterday, you noticed that I put up the raw video instead of the edited video, so you saw all the mistakes and stuff at the beginning. But glad nobody even pointed that out. But I did update that video, and I want to mention that this coming Sunday, I'm starting the series on the Book of Acts, and it's a powerful, powerful book. And I ask you to pray that God would speak through me into our church, and that we would experience everything that the Book of Acts is talking about. So that's coming up this coming Sunday. So now let's get into Nehemiah chapter 5. So in chapter 4, there was opposition. So yesterday we looked at how he faces opposition, criticism from without. Well, there's not only criticism or opposition that we have to face from without, but there's also opposition that we need to face from within at times, in terms of within the family. So that's kind of what's happening here. So let's look at it and see what we can draw from Nehemiah chapter 5. It says, "Now the men and their wives raised a great outcry against their fellow Jews. Some were saying, 'We and our sons and daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and stay alive, we must get grain.' Others were saying, 'We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine.' Still others were saying, 'We have had to borrow money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards. And although we are of the same flesh and blood as our fellow Jews, and though our children are as good as theirs, yet we have to subject our sons and daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others." Okay, so what's happening here is that you have the nobles, the officials, people who had land, more land, and who had grain to be able to give to those who were in need. It seems that there was a famine going on. So they couldn't grow grain, so they had to purchase. And in order to do that, they were mortgaging their fields and pay the tax, and all these things still had to be done. And even to the point where when they couldn't pay it back, they were having to give their sons and their daughters over as servants to their own brothers. These are not to foreigners, these are to their own Jews. So in verse 6, "When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and officials." So it's interesting here again, he ponders it, right? So he's letting us know he gets angry right away. And then he ponders, he's meditating on it, he's thinking about it. And then he speaks. It doesn't make it seem like maybe what's happening is it's festering, his anger is growing, he's arguing within his own mind. Because we do that as well, right? We hear something and we start to let it ponder and grow. That's not necessarily what's happening here, but he is, before he speaks, he's thinking about what's happening. He probably wants to remind himself, okay, what does the law say? What is the right thing to say? But then he does accuse. It says, "So I called together." Let's see, I'm sorry. It says right here, "I pondered these," verse 7, "and then accused the nobles and officials. I told them, 'You are charging your own people interest.' So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, 'As far as possible, we have bought back our fellow Jews who were sold to the Gentiles. Now you are selling your own people only for them to go back to us, or be sold back to us.' They kept quiet because they could find nothing to say." So they knew where they were in the wrong. And the Old Testament law gave the ability to loan to your brothers, but not charge interest. Now let's look at this for a moment. So, well, let's keep reading, and then we'll talk about it. "So I continued," verse 9. "So I continued, 'What you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in fear of our God and avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? I and my brothers and my men are lending the people money and grain, but let us stop charging interest. Give back to them immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the interest you are charging them. 1% of the money, grain, new wine, and olive oil. We will give it back,' they said, 'and we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say.'" Okay, so what he's saying, okay, you should give to them in need, and there's a famine, there is need here. But let's understand what he's saying is not that you should just automatically give and not expect to be to be charged, right? So let's understand creditors, people who loan money, they're in the business of loaning money in order to charge interest, and that's how they make money. If they just loaned you money and just simply got back what they gave you, they'd make no money. So what he's saying here is something that should be done. Now, this is in the government. This is with the people of Israel. So God, in God's economy, he wrote that in to where that was something that the leaders and the governors should do is in times of need with their own people. But it doesn't mean that charging interest in and of itself is wrong. Creditors, people that make money, you have to understand if you get a loan, they're going to charge you interest. They're going to do as much as they can. And what we see in our country today is, there's loaning money, credit cards, things like that, mortgages with interest is not wrong in itself. That's how people make money. It's a business. But setting up systems that are meant to fail, are meant to make you as much money as possible, the government or the company as much money as possible, with a great possibility or chance that the person who is borrowing the money is going to not be able to pay it back or be paying interest for the rest of their lives, is wrong, and I would say immoral. And but we need to be wise enough to not get into that type of debt. But this some of what we're reading here gets into what we're seeing now with healthcare, with college, and how much everything costs. Everything shouldn't be free, in my opinion. Everything shouldn't be free. But at the same time, people shouldn't be exploited, and that's where we're seeing. Okay, yeah, I think most people understand. You should have to pay for services, for things. Everything comes with a price. But we also understand. But wait a minute, there are abuses going on here. There are costs that are going through the roof that are making it impossible for people to be able to pay for things that they need, and that they would be able to pay for. But with these prices, it's impossible. So some of what's happening in our world today, we can see is happening here. And Nehemiah deals with it right away. Now, he had within the law of God the authority and the moral standing to be able to say what you're doing is wrong. And one of the things that this underscores is the impact that godly leaders can have. And because these other people seem to be fine with doing what they were doing. But Nehemiah says, no, that we're not going to do this. And he's able to change and correct the inappropriate behavior that's going on because of his moral stands and because of what wanting to obey and what the scripture says. And understand also that most of these people are creditors. Most of these people are nobles and officials who have grain and have things that people would come to them to borrow, and then there will always the expectation of paying it back. But the Bible does say that we should not be loaning or taking from people as much as possible. We should not get into debt. So this is not just necessarily friend to friend or that kind of thing. These are creditors. These are people that are giving money to people on a regular basis. But then Nehemiah goes on, and in chapter 5, and he mentions how he is receiving people, allowing them to eat at his table. It says in verse 15, but earlier the governors, those preceding me, talking about the people that the governors before him, placed a heavy burden on the people and took 40 shekels of silver from them in addition to food and wine. The assistants also lorded it over the people. But out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. Instead, I devoted myself to the work on this wall. All my men were assembled there for the work. We did not acquire any land. Right? So again, he's not taking advantage of the situation to enrich himself. Furthermore, 150 Jews and officials ate at my table. Furthermore, 150 Jews and officials ate at my table, as well as those who came to us from the surrounding nations. Each day, 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, and some poultry were prepared for me, and every 10 days an abundant supply of wine of all kinds. In spite of all this, I never demanded the food allotted to the governor, because the demands were heavy on the people. Remember me with favor, my God, for all I have done for these people. So he's letting them, again, it's documenting here. With all that he had, he shared. Right? He didn't put a heavier burden on the people than they already had. He understood what they were going through and shared his resources with them. And then at the end there, right? Remember with favor, my God, for all that I've done for these people. Now, you get the sense in Nehemiah's heart that he's not a man who is doing things, to get rich materially, or and necessarily to get rich or in favor with God. But he has no problem asking God to bless him. He has no problem understanding what we would call, he doesn't have, um, I forget the word here, but this false sense of humility, false humility. He's like, no, you know what? I don't need power. I'm not going to try to take advantage of other people, but I do recognize that what I'm doing is right, and I don't have a problem acknowledging that, or even even letting God know, Lord, I am doing what is right. Will you remember me and have favor on me because I am obeying you, and out of reverence for you, I am leading and treating the people this way. So, just again, it's some more to learn from the life of Nehemiah and his leadership, and hope that it speaks to you and how you lead your people, your family, those that are under your responsibility, and how to pray also for our nation and what we really need to see God do, that God would bring up leaders like Nehemiah in our time. So the Lord bless you, and keep praying, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. God bless.